Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. We are tracing the shocking evolution of Christianity's ultimate villain, Satan. It is a 1,500-year historical detective story where a generic job title morphed into a cosmic archenemy. And at the heart of this evolution is one of the most profound debates between theology and atheism. The problem of evil. How does a supposedly good God allow suffering? We will explore how ancient scribes literally reshaped their texts to protect God's character, leading to the devil we know today.
It really is just a massive paradigm shift when you finally look at the historical records in order.
Yeah, and we are looking at texts today that completely reframe the Garden of Eden. I mean, if you ask almost anyone who that snake in the tree was, they will instantly tell you it was Satan.
Right, it's just assumed at this point.
Exactly. But there's this massive, unavoidable biblical paradox. The serpent is never actually called Satan anywhere in the entire Hebrew Bible.
Nowhere in the Genesis account.
Right, nowhere. That explicit name drop doesn't happen until Revelation 12.9, which is roughly 1,400 years later.
It's a staggering gap in the timeline.
It really is. So today our mission is to figure out exactly how a generic talking reptile evolved into the undisputed Prince of Darkness. Oh, and before we jump into the ancient Hebrew, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button.
Always good to get that out of the way.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand the origins, we have to look at the original Hebrew word ha-Satan.
Right, ha-Satan.
Because in the early texts, this isn't a proper personal name like David or Moses. Since Hebrew uses the definitive article the, just like we do in English, ha-Satan translates literally to the adversary or the opposer. It's just a job description, like the prosecutor.
What's fascinating here is how clearly we see that functional role play out in Job 1.6.
The divine council scene.
Exactly. In Job, the Satan is just a member of the divine council. He's a heavenly middle manager whose literal job is to patrol the earth and report back to God.
Basically conducting an audit.
Yeah, he challenges God's assessment of Job, but he isn't a pitchfork-wielding demon. He's essentially a prosecutor doing his job with a really bad attitude.
A very cynical performance review.
And the word is even used for regular humans or angels acting as obstacles, like the angel blocking Balaam in the Book of Numbers or human adversaries in 1 Kings.
So functionally speaking, if someone cuts you off in traffic in ancient Israel, you could grammatically call them a Satan.
You absolutely could. It simply frames the concept as a functional role, not an evil entity.
But then we hit this massive watershed moment.
Yeah.
It's so stark when you look at 2 Samuel 24.1, that 1 Chronicles 21.1 side by side.
The census story.
Right, it's 2 identical historical events told in 2 different books. In 2 Samuel, which was written earlier, God's anger incites King David to take a census, which leads to 70,000 people dying in a plague.
So God causes the sin and then punishes it.
Yes. But in 1 Chronicles, which is written much later, it says Satan stood up and incited David. Crucially, the definitive article is gone. It's just Satan, the very first time it's used as a proper name.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are looking at the exact epicenter of the core arguments of atheism versus theism today.
The problem of evil.
Exactly. See, before the Babylonian exile, ancient Israelite theology was totally comfortable with God causing both good and evil. Isaiah 45.7 says, I make peace and I create evil.
But then the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem.
Right. They burned the temple, dragged the people into exile. That horrific trauma sparked a massive theological crisis. The scribes had to ask, how can God be entirely good if he is the direct cause of catastrophic evil? This is the classic problem of evil that atheists point to today.
Reconciling an all-good deity with extreme suffering. So how did they solve it?
The author of Chronicles solved this theological problem by introducing a separate adversarial figure to take the blame for the temptation. God remains sovereign and permits it, but the adversary executes it.
Effectively protecting God's moral character.
It's a textbook example of theodicy in action.
But wait, I have to ask on behalf of the listener, did the ancient Israelites just steal this idea of a cosmic bad guy from the Persians because they were conquered by Babylon and then Persia conquered Babylon?
And the Persian religion, Zoroastrianism, featured absolute dualism.
Yeah, a good god, Ahura Mazda, fighting an equal evil spirit, Angrameyu.
It's a very common theory, but the evidence shows they didn't just copy the Persians. There was definitely cultural contact. But the Jewish scribes didn't invent Satan by importing him.
Because the structures are totally different, right?
Right. Unlike Zoroastrianism's equal battle, the biblical Satan is always a created, subordinate being. Instead of importing the idea, Jewish theologians actually excavated it from their own older texts.
Like the rebellious sons of God in Genesis 6.
Or the corrupt divine counsel in Psalm 82. The trauma of suffering drove them back to their scriptures to find patterns they just hadn't connected before.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We enter the Second Temple period. This is between the Old and New Testaments. And the concept of Satan fully develops here, just exploding into various names.
An entire vocabulary attempting to describe the same adversarial role.
Let's break those down. First one, mastema.
So in the Book of Jubilees, Mastema takes the blame for God's morally difficult actions in the Torah.
Like the really disturbing part where God tries to kill Moses in Exodus.
Or telling Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. Mastema is the one who suggests the test, basically letting God off the hook. Another prime example of theodicy.
Okay, what about Belial?
In the Dead Sea Scrolls, Belial is the prince of darkness. The Essene community who wrote those scrolls were isolated and heavily persecuted.
So they viewed the world in cosmic dualism.
Exactly. Sons of light versus sons of darkness led by Belial. It provided a framework to explain why they were suffering so much under Greek rule.
And the last major one, Beelzebub.
That one is actually a mocking title. The Israelites took the Canaanite storm and underworld god Baal the Prince and mockingly renamed him Lord of the Flies.
Which eventually gets conflated with Satan in the New Testament.
It all just organically merged together over the centuries.
But bringing it back to the very beginning for you listening, how did a literal snake in Genesis 3 actually become Satan?
That comes down to a linguistic masterpiece in the Hebrew text. The specific word used for the serpent is nahash, and it is a triple entendre.
Meaning three things simultaneously.
Right. First, serpent, or a creature. Second, shining one, deriving from a root word for gleaming bronze or copper.
Indicating a divine, radiant, heavenly being.
Exactly. And third, enchanter, or diviner, designating someone associated with forbidden supernatural knowledge.
So the original readers knew this wasn't just a talking garden snake trying to ruin a picnic.
No, they understood it was a divine rebel, a shining one practicing enchantment. Second Temple Jews connected the dots retroactively.
That's progressive revelation.
Yes. So by the time Paul writes the New Testament, it's universally assumed the serpent is Satan, even though the explicit, definitive link is finally made in Revelation 12.9.
Calling him that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan.
Completing that massive 1,500-year theological arc.
So I want you to do a quick visual check for me. Picture Satan in your mind right now. You probably picture a red guy with horns, a tail, and a pitchfork. But that specific visual image is absolutely nowhere in the Bible.
Nowhere at all. It came entirely from early Christian church marketing.
They were actively demonizing Greek and Roman gods.
Exactly. They took Pan, who was half-goat with horns and hooves, and Hades, or Pluto, the god of the underworld, carrying a two-pronged bident, which looks exactly like a pitchfork.
And they branded that imagery as the devil to stop people from worshiping them.
Right. And later on, medieval art and Dante's Inferno solidified this cartoonish image so illiterate populations could easily recognize evil in church paintings.
But there is a huge theological danger in that. A cartoonish red devil is so easy to dismiss. The biblical Satan, described as a subtle, attractive angel of light or a shining one, is far more dangerous because he sounds completely reasonable.
This raises an important question. If there were other rebellions, why is the Eden serpent the boss of all the other rebellious spirits?
Yeah, why does he get to be the king of hell?
Because his specific rebellion introduced death. His curse in Genesis 3 was to eat the dust.
Which is ancient imagery for the underworld.
Yes. He was demoted from a radiant, shining being to the king of the realm of the dead. All other evil spirits defer to him because eventually every single human dies and ends up in his domain.
So what does this all mean? The Bible tells a 1,500-year story where human suffering, persecution, and deep philosophical questions about the problem of evil forced ancient writers to re-examine their texts.
They don't just invent a villain out of nowhere.
No, they slowly connected the dots of a cosmic rebellion, protecting the ultimate goodness of God in the process.
And I think there is a profound final thought here. If the ultimate image of cosmic evil was slowly synthesized and visually constructed over centuries to explain the brutal realities of human suffering and protect the concept of a benevolent God, how much of our modern understanding of morality, good and evil, is still just us grappling with those exact same ancient philosophical questions today? Are we still just looking for a face to put on the tragedies we can't explain?
That is something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep thinking deeper, and we'll catch you next time.